Welcome to this Candidates Forum for Ojai City Council. It's being sponsored by the League of Women Voters, and the City of Ojai has been kind enough to provide the setting and the help to set it up. Before we begin, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hi, my name is Pat Essick, and I'm a member, co-president of the League of Women Voters for Ventura County, and we're really happy to be able to participate in tonight's Candidates Forum, something we do all over the county. We thank all of you for being here tonight, and in particular the candidates. We know that you're putting in a lot of effort and time to run for this job, and without willing and able candidates like you, our country and our system of government wouldn't operate very well. So thank you very much. I'd like to give you a brief history of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 to educate the millions of new women voters that were granted the right to vote by the passage of the 19th Amendment. Today, almost 100 years later, the League remains a nonpartisan but political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in the government. To honor our historical roots, we've kept the word women in our title, League of Women Voters, but the League is for everyone. We encourage all of you to help us on our mission, which includes our sponsorship of candidate forums just like this one. Our table is outside, and please stop by before you leave tonight, look at our literature, and I hope you might consider joining us, because it is an all-volunteer organization on the local level. Okay. The League also provides a free web space to all candidates for public office called smartvoter.org. It can be very helpful when you're trying to decide how to vote. It gives you a lot of information. There's bookmarks with the website on it at the membership table right outside. Thank you again for being here tonight. It shows that you care about the city of Ojai and what these candidates have to say. But remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Be sure to vote on November 4th and encourage all of your friends and neighbors to do the same. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to our moderator, Jeanette Hosek.
Thank you, Pat, very much. This is my fourth Candidates Forum this week, and so we're very pleased that you're coming. And my husband and I drove up from Thousand Oaks. One of the things that the League does is make sure that the moderator is not a member of the community so that there is no bias shown towards the candidates. I don't know any of these people that are on the podium, and so I will be running the meeting, and thank you again for coming. The candidates for City Council are Paul Blatz, incumbent, Randy Haney, Brandon Hansen, Stephen Quilisi, and William Wyrick. They are running for 3 open positions on the council. The City Council, as you may know, serves as the legislative body for the city, passing legislation either as an ordinance or a resolution. The council also authorizes the annual budget, approves expenditures, sets licenses and other fees. The council appoints the city manager, the city attorney, and makes appointments to advisory commissions, committees, and boards. Council members are paid a stipend of $475 a month and receive various insurance benefits paid for by the city. We will begin our forum tonight with a timed opening statement from each candidate of 2 minutes in length. And after that, we will take questions from the audience. The question period, the answers to the questions are very brief, 1 minute. So we ask you, if you are writing questions, that you keep your question brief and direct so that the candidates can answer them within the time period. All responses this evening, the timed introductions, the questions, and the closing remarks are going to be timed. And our timers in the front row here, and they will hold up paddles of warning for 30 seconds and stop. And by stop, that means I will say thank you very much, and you will stop. Because candidate forums are such an important and valuable part of your education as a voter, besides this one tonight, I wish to let you know that Sunday evening at Channel Islands University in Camarillo will be the only candidates forum for the congressional district featuring Julia Brownlee and Jeff Correll. So if you want to make the trip down the road on Sunday, it starts at 6 o'clock in the Grand Salon of the campus, and the two candidates will be there from 6 to 7:30. And that is also sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Ventura County. My name is Jeanette Hosek, and I am a 40-year member. You couldn't tell it by looking at me, but I am a 40-year member of the League of Women Voter, starting my career in the League in New Hampshire, driving across country, and now in California. So it's an organization that's very important to me, and I think it's important to what we provide to the community. Now, the candidates are seated according by the random choice of their name, and so the first opening statement is to William Wyrick. Thank you.
Make sure the microphone's working. 4 generations ago, my family started coming to Southern California, and that's a constant source of inspiration to me, knowing the history and the challenges that they faced over that period. And for myself, I started coming to Ojai in the 1970s, fell in love with it, and know from personal experience from that family history how special it is, the development path that Ojai has found itself on, has placed itself on by generations of activists, volunteers, and inspired citizens. Keeping on that path requires the diligence of all of us, and it also requires the kind of city government that ensures that the mechanics of the city government keep us on that path. City government works when the city council gives very clear policy direction to staff, insists on fair and consistent treatment of all of its citizens, is transparent and accountable. That goal, I think, has been in large part pursued, but there have been some missteps. There's been some times, for example, with the wireless situation, where the communication that we should have in place has not been in place. We've slipped into some bad habits. I believe, for example, deciding to not enforce ordinances and spending years deciding whether they should be enforced or not is not the way we should be governing. If there's a problem with an ordinance, fix it or continue enforcing it. And so I think that it's important that we all look to work together, to have a council giving that clear policy direction to the rest of city government, welcome and encourage and embrace the nature of Ojai's activism that has kept us on this development path, and work together to make the experience that all citizens have with city government as fulfilling and not frustrating as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrick. And our second speaker is Randy Haney.
Good evening. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and pretty much grew up in, well, here we go. This is so hard. It's so difficult, but you know what? I came here 20 years ago. My wife and I and my young son, Justin, he was at the age of 9. We had left Mar Vista down in Los Angeles pretty much because it had become an unsafe environment to raise children. So the first thing we were looking for in a community was safety. The second thing that we were looking for in a community were quality schools, quality education. We were looking for open space, parkland. I grew up camping. I grew up coming to Lake Casitas. I grew up going to Lake Piru. So having a quality environment like that was important. And one of the most important things that we were looking for was a community that cared about itself and cared about the people that were in it. So for 20 years I've been here. For 20 years I've dedicated myself to coaching, to being a big part of this community, donating my time. I've spent 3 years at the youth level. I spent 14 years at the high school level, and I've donated the last 8 years to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Altogether, it's about 4,000 hours of community service in the last 20 years. So being a part of the City Council is going to be a continuation of that dedication. I bring strong leadership. I bring, I believe, a great skill of listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Gentlemen, I've just been told by the TV crew that your handsome faces are being blocked by your microphones. So please make sure that your microphone does not go above your chin. Speak into the mic, but keep it chin-wise, because otherwise you'll look funny on TV. Our third speaker this evening is Brandon Hanson. Mr. Hanson.
Good evening, friends and neighbors. My name is Brandon Hanson. I thank you all for coming out to support us for the 2014 City Council elections. My family has been in this valley for over 100 years. Throughout the generations, we have been volunteer firemen, we have opened service stations, we have been teachers, we have been water well drillers, we have been charter members for the Lions Club and sat on the board, been vice president of the current Lions Club. My experience in small-town business in Ojai spans over 30 years. At the age of 10, I delivered newspapers here in the local neighborhoods. I delivered pizzas in town. I was the swim instructor and lifeguard at the Noroff Pool for many years through high school. All that was dealing with the general public here in town. I've got to experience all walks of life here, and I think we have a very diverse community. As an adult, I have run and expanded our water well service company. At about the age of 20, I decided to begin drilling water wells again, as my grandfather and great-grandfather had done in years past. What I've learned over my 30 years in business is there is always a solution to every problem. First and foremost, I think the council's elected to represent the community as a whole. That doesn't translate into pushing some obscure objective of my own for a small group of people. As a council member, the job is to make educated decisions as to what's best for the entire community. I'm confident that I have the skills to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Our next speaker is Paul Blatz.
Good evening, everyone. I first want to thank the League for sponsoring this candidates forum this evening. And I began thinking about what I was going to say tonight because we had a forum last week, and I thought that I reflected on my time in Ojai, and I thought about how proud I am to have been in our community for 31 years. I think back on how proud I was to serve on our planning commission for 10 years. And I also think how proud I am to have been on the city council and served our community for the last 4.5 years. And I'm proud about being on the council for the last 4.5 years because of the work that we've been able to accomplish. I truly believe that transparency has been brought back into our city, and it really does, from the comments that I receive, appear that there is more confidence in the quality and the ability of our city government. I, for one, have assured everyone that has wanted to talk that they've had an ear to have someone listen to them and that they've been heard, no matter who they are in our community. However, despite the successes that we have had over the last 4.5 years, there are still many issues affecting our community that need our attention. We need to stay focused on our affordable housing. We need to rid ourselves of Golden State Water Company. And we need to be prepared, and always prepared, to fight against the outside developers and other forces that will not benefit our community. I'm running for re-election because I look forward to being part of solving these issues that still remain and continue serving the citizens of Ojai for another 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Blatz. And our last speaker is Stephen Quillisi. What dear?
Quillisi.
Quillisi. Quillisi.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to the League for organizing this, and thank you to all of you for having enough interest in who governs the city here to come out and listen to all of us this evening. My wife Judy and I have lived here for 11 years, but her family's been here for 60, and I've been visiting Ojai, either sports against Nordhoff or getting married and bringing children and now grandchildren to Ojai for more than 50 years. It's a great place. It has a wonderful mix of large and small businesses, and I have experience in both. Besides my education, which we can talk about later, I am currently a president or past president or director of 3 charitable nonprofit organizations. I have run a small business. I understand the problems with cash flow, with keeping the doors open, and with keeping good employees during hard times. I'm running for council to help focus the council on the most important issues in the city: water, affordable housing, jobs, and tax revenue. I believe in limited government, but I see a very good place for small government in this city. As a council member, I would insist on timely, complete, and accurate information from city staff so that we can make informed decisions on the council. I would insist that when the council or the city makes demands of a citizen or a business, that it be in writing, in detail, and follow the law. I will listen carefully and respectfully to all interested people who come before the council and try my best to make transparent and clearly fair decisions. Finally, I think we need more attention to finances. I believe right now the city is spending money on things that it doesn't need to, and it should stop. It should stop.
Thank you very much. We're now going to switch to our question mode, but before we do that, can I remind you, if you have a cell phone that's on, could you please make sure it's either in the off position or in the vibrate position? We don't want to not hear something because of the ringing of your telephone. So, to our questions. And we are going to begin with Mr. Haney first. We'll go down the line, giving the first shot to a new person each time. This question, gentlemen, is, as a council member, what could you do to increase jobs in Ojai? Mr. Haney?
Boy, you know, at the last forum, I got the question of how could I make Ojai more affordable? So how do I increase the job base here? Well, you know what, I have property down on Bryant Street, and right now that's about the only commercial district that we have in town. So if we wanted to increase jobs, one, we'd obviously have to increase the commercial area, and the rents, well, it goes fast, and the rents in these commercial areas need to come down. So that'd be one of the things that I would do. One is create more rental space, lower the cost of this rental, and hopefully sell Ojai as a place that businesses can come and grow.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, Brandon, next. How, as a councilman, what would you do to increase jobs in Ojai?
Well, I think that Ojai's business is largely supported by tourism and our large art community. So for me, I think that doing more to encourage tourism in town, doing more to encourage businesses, to take some of the burdens away, to help the permitting process for some of the types of businesses that we'd like to have in town. Those are the things that come to mind.
Thank you. Mr. Blatz, how would you increase jobs? What could you do to increase jobs?
One of the things that I've talked about in this campaign is developing an economic development council, which would look at the area of business in Ojai that would be friendly business to Ojai, that could then generate more jobs. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut where the Yale University School of Music and Art was there for the summer. And I've been thinking about all kinds of the way that we have the arts and the music and things like that in Ojai, that certainly we could put that bowling alley to good use if we could get somebody like USC to come up here with some sort of a music and art program, if not in the summer, more than that. And I think that that's what we need to get on, is what makes Ojai strong is our arts and our music and our tourism, and try to get businesses that fit into that to generate more jobs.
Thank you. Stephen, what would you do to increase jobs in Ojai?
I think that the first thing we can do is look for empty spaces in the city, particularly empty retail spaces, and Paul mentioned the bowling alley, and make the process of starting a new business in the city more flexible from the point of view of the city, whether it's temporary tax abatements or other flexibility in the code that we have to encourage businesses to start here in the city, whether it's arts or tourism related or manufacturing. We have manufacturing down Bryan Place. Any of those things will be adding good jobs to the city, and that's where I would start on the council.
Thank you. And our final answer to this question, William, how would you increase jobs in the city?
How many times have some of you met with a person trying to expand a business, do a renovation, and said, you know what, I thought I had everything complete, with the city permitting and regulatory process, and all they had this last thing that came on me. Oh my goodness, That's one thing council can do very specifically. We can look at how to make Ojai as not regulation, not cease regulation, but make it clear, checklist based. Make sure that people, when they want to take the risk of expanding and investing in our community, are given as much of a clear path as possible as to what they need to do at the front end. That's one thing you really need to look at. And then also dealing with, as the other speakers have talked about, broad-based cooperation across the board, school system, other agencies in the valley, to look at how you can increase the amenities and the reasons why people want to be here. That's, I think, the best long-run strategy for job growth in this community.
Thank you. Our second question, and we will start this question with Brandon. Brandon, the question is, given all the discussion about city-school district relationship, would you promote how would you promote affordable housing which will help with the declining enrollment in schools?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that the declining enrollment has to do with affordable housing, but the affordable housing issue in town is a very tough issue to deal with. We have a limited amount of space. Most people in town have at least a somewhat dislike of development in town. So I think that probably the one and only thing that we can do to promote affordable housing in town, which in turn may help the school enrollment, is to find buildings in town that we can use to promote affordable housing. So find existing structures, modify them in a way that allows for affordable housing.
Thank you. Paul?
One of the things that is very important to our community is affordable housing, and the indirect effect of not having affordable housing is the school system and its declining population. I think that the way we have to do it is to find some public property where we can do a public-private partnership with someone that's going to be able to develop some affordable housing, and that would be in the city. But keep in mind that the school district is outside our city as well. And there may be ways that in order to affect our affordable housing, that outside the city we can somehow do some sort of a joint venture with the county and helping the county get some affordable housing as well. Because the school system is not just dependent on the households within the 3.5 square miles of Ojai, but it's also dependent on a lot of area outside the city limits.
Thank you. Stephen, your 1 minute on affordable housing.
Okay. sorry. Thought we were talking about the school district
Right.
and affordable housing. Okay.
Yes, that was the question.
The first thing I think is that we need to separate the city council meetings and the school board meetings and put them at different times so that the two groups will actually wind up having the opportunity to talk to each other. Right now, their meetings conflict, and so neither one sees the other on any even infrequent basis, it seems. As far as affordable housing, Judy, my wife, and I have walked all the blocks of this city, all 100+ streets, and we've seen a lot of second and third units, even third units on a lot of properties, and we don't know how much the city knows about all the housing that is here. Some of it is temporary occupancy, some of it's full-time renters or owners, I don't know. But until we have good data on what the housing stock is in the city, I don't think the council's in a good position.
Thank you. William, the relationship with schools, cities, enrollment, and affordable housing is the
Yeah,
question.
1 minute, right. I think that, first of all, just to amplify what Mr. Quilisi said, absolutely essential that we have better communication between the two largest agencies in this valley. On affordable housing and specifically, there really are three legs to this. I think first is the fact that second unit reform needs to happen. We have to realize that our second unit ordinance was designed to basically inhibit this. We are talking about trends in our economy that really are pushing towards multi-generational living on the same parcels. Our biggest group in this city is my age group, 55 to 65, and we need to look at changing with the times, I believe, on that. Vacation rentals are impacting the availability of housing. San Francisco just passed a new ordinance dealing with this issue. We need to realize there's a relationship between decreasing housing opportunities and the expansion of vacation rentals in an unregulated way. And then we need to work in a creative and within Ojai character fashion with developments like groups like the People's Housing Workshop that we just saw. Thank you.
And finally, Randy?
I concur with Bill. No.
Thank-
You know, I think that the decline in children is, it's a symptom. And the symptom is demographics. It's that simple. The people moving into this community are between 55 and 65. There's no jobs per se in this community. Housing is expensive. Rental is expensive. I mean, there's plenty of cities in this county where all of those are available. So we've got to change that perspective for us to increase children coming into this community and young adults coming into this community. And it's a tough one. Affordable housing, that's even a greater issue. What's affordable? Someone needs to ask yourself that.
Thank you. Our next question is, would you support increasing the building code enforcement? Why or why not? And we will start with Mr. Blatz.
I'm going to answer this question in a couple of different ways because it's something that our Building Appeals Board is currently working on. Obviously, our building codes, as buildings are being built, has to be strictly enforced. And permits and inspections and things like that have to be done. And they have to be done properly, and it has to be built according to the way that our code says it should be. I think what this question is referring to, though, is what if something is built not in accordance with our code? What do we do about it? And yes, it should be strictly enforced, and it should be strictly enforced against everyone, evenly and equitably enforced throughout the community.
Stephen? Would you support increasing code building enforcement?
I'd have to study it more to know if we need to tighten the building codes or not. As a homeowner here who's had 2 major permitted projects done around the house, rewiring and putting in 100 feet of new sewer line, I have seen the permitting process and I have seen the inspection process, and so far both to me were eminently fair and equitable. If the rules are not being applied the same to everyone, That has to stop. It doesn't matter if the enforcement of codes or of permits or of cost of permits only appears to be unequal, or whether it is unequal, both have to go. We have to have one set of rules for everyone in this city, and they should either be enforced or changed, and then enforced.
Thank you. And William, code enforcement increases?
I think that obviously you have to have enforcement that is equal and consistent and fair. But I'm going to take a little bit of privilege here and talk about other aspects of enforcement. As chair of the Building Appeals Board, we've really spent a lot of time looking at proposals to add codes over and above what's required by the state. And some of these things really sometimes don't make sense. And we really have to look at whether or not they serve the needs of our citizens, or whether it's something that's sort of a habit and bureaucratic driven that we really need to examine. Another aspect of building enforcement that everyone needs to realize is that if you read the code carefully, there's always some elements of discretion. There's always elements of, use common sense. And we need to make sure that we have the people operating out of the Community Development Department that maintain and retain that common sense aspect to building enforcement.
Thank you. And Randy?
Jeanette, what was the question
The
again?
question is, would you support increasing building code enforcement? Why or why not?
Well, I guess the first question would be, do we have a problem? So that would be the first question I take to the community. Is there a sense out there that when you file for a permit, or if you have an issue regarding a permit, that you're not being heard? So I'm a contractor. We pull permits all the time. I found out that my interaction with the city building department is, I think they're an incredible group of people. They're smart, they're knowledgeable, they're there to look out for you as well as to look out for me. So until I'm aware, or I'm going to be made aware that there's an issue, I think that the enforcement that we have right now works.
Thank you. And lastly, Brandon, support increasing the building code enforcement?
So, I believe that that safety codes, or the safety parts of the building code enforcement, is very important. I've done a major remodel here in town in my own home. My wife is a designer and worked for several different people, with several different people here locally in town, and I've always found that that at least in the remodel side and that sort of thing, that the codes and the code enforcement works fairly well. I know that there are some complaints from people that my wife works with that the new construction and some of the requirements and that sort of thing are more extensive than they may see in other places in the county. So I would say that the big thing for me is just making sure that our codes make sense, and that they're not counterproductive to people's projects, so long as those projects don't fall outside of what would generally be considered acceptable by the community.
Thank you. My husband and I just replaced 100 feet of sewer pipe this week. Let me tell you, it's no fun. Question number 4. What can you as a council person do to help with our water problem? And we'll begin this question with Stephen.
Thank you. I think a lot of the groundwork for dealing with the water problem is already well underway. We had an election last year, and well over 80% of the votes were in favor of authorizing Casitas to purchase Golden State Water. Their rates are 3 times what Casitas is, and in large part, it's the same water that we're drinking that Miners Oaks gets completely from Casitas. I applaud the council for funding Flow to carry on a fight against the latest rate case. That's a big change from 3 years ago, and I think we may have a very good result this time in terms of stopping the worst abuses of the rate case increases. The last thing is private wells. We don't know right now how many private wells there are, how much water they're drawing, whether they're being monitored and metered, and I think the council needs that data.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Stephen. Our next speaker would be William on this question. What can the council do to help with our water problem?
First and foremost, research and question. For example, I invite everybody to watch, if they don't come to the this coming council meeting, where the OBGMA is going to make a presentation to City Council in response to some questions City Council had about meters in the valley. We all need to learn more. We also, of course, need to absolutely support Flow in what it's doing in terms of advocating for the ratepayers as a whole. There is a new law that has just passed by the state integrating groundwater and surface flows into sustainability plans. City needs, I think, to exercise leadership in pushing for as much of a broad-based approach to that as possible. There are some issues with some balkanization, the agencies involved in that, and the city needs to, I think, step up and look in that. And also, water's not just what we get out of the tap, it's also what goes down the pipe. We have sanitary district issues we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy, what is your take on the water problem?
Well, obviously, we need to remove Golden State. That's the easiest response. Their rates being three times higher than Casitas Water District is just, I pay $500 a month for water. I live in Pleasant Avenue. It's just astronomical. Second of all, the funding of Flow to continue to fight the rate increase is obviously very important. What can we do personally? I think that we need to look at our landscape ordinance, and that was just passed recently. And from a landscape contractor standpoint, I think we could do better with how we maintain our personal properties. We could remove a lot of grass. We could start implementing a lot of water-wise landscaping. And more importantly is all the citizens that have cut the water off on their property and that are killing all of these trees. They need to recognize what they're doing, and they need to service those trees as soon as they can. And the simplest thing would be to convert their irrigation system to a drip system around those trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon, what can council do to help with the water problem?
Well, first and foremost, the council can continue to support the effort to remove Golden State as our water purveyor. Secondly, there was some mention about the Ojai Basin and the amount of water that's used out of the basin. There's approximately 175 wells currently in the basin, and I believe about 5,000 acre-feet of water that's used per year. The city and the county just finished about a month ago. They had the ribbon cutting ceremony for about a $3 million recharge project up off of Karn and Thatcher. That is one of the things that the local agencies are doing to provide more groundwater for the Ojai Basin. And, the basin here actually is very prolific and could actually last for over a decade without one drop of rain that comes into the valley. So I think that continued support of the projects like the Spreading Grounds project is one of the ways.
Thank you. And Paul?
I guess when you're asked a question as to how do you solve the problem with water, you have to define problem. I'm not sure exactly what the person that wrote the question meant. If the problem is the cost, then certainly we need to rid ourselves of Golden State Water Company. If the problem is the drought, then I think what we need to do is we need to look at our landscaping ordinance, which we recently instituted, which is going to use less water. And I think also, as from a valley standpoint and from a city standpoint, we need to do something to be able to promote the capture of rainwater when we do have rain, so that it can be stored, so that we can use it in the future, or it can be re-injected back into the aquifer. I think that's one of the most important things we can do. Too much of our rainwater runs right out into the ocean.
Thank you. Our next question is, do you support new chain stores in Ojai? And we will start with William.
I wholeheartedly support the existing formula business ordinance that's adopted by the city of Ojai. I view it smack dab in the middle of the lineage from stopping the freeway coming up in the valley, many decades ago to the present time. It's part of what government should do in terms of preserving the character and dealing with development threats both in the city of Ojai and in terms of cooperation with other agencies and activist groups, the valley as a whole. I think we had a situation where it just worked. The Star Market wanted a variance to be freed from the formula business ordinance, the city council, and I think appropriately so, commend Paul Blatz and the rest of the councilmen for saying no, and it worked. We created an entrepreneurial activity from a local business person, and that's what we want in Ojai.
Randy, your feelings about new chain stores in Ojai?
Well, obviously, when we talk chain stores, we're talking big box. I think that's what comes to mind. So obviously, I'd be dead set against that. Paul Blatz brought up an issue, or not an issue, but a response at the last forum about 2,000 feet and 10,000 feet, the square footages of allowable space for stores. So after hearing that, I'm kind of hesitant to say no chain, because when I look at Jersey Mike's, or I look at something like that, part of me says it's here and maybe that's something that can continue. But the other part of me says no, that the small entrepreneur businesses that we have here are important. The community that it creates is obviously very important. So my gut says no. And
thank you. And Brandon, your comments on chain stores in Ojai?
I feel that our lack of chain stores here really defines us as a community in comparison to just about anywhere else that one might go. I do not support any new chain stores in town. There are some chain stores in town, or could be considered that way, that are here, and I would have no intention of doing anything about. But the answer is no. I would never support chain stores in town.
Thank you. And Paul, your comments on chain stores?
Having been part of the council when we strengthened the formula business ordinance in the last couple of years, I certainly support what we have done with the formula business ordinance, and I do not support any large chain stores. And in the ordinance itself, if there was a small chain store that wanted to apply for a conditional use permit, and there was enough groundswell of the community that wished to have it, even though that would not be my desire, there's a process that we can go through public hearings and let the public decide. But no, I am not in favor of chain stores in Ojai. Our economy is based on tourism, and we're unique, and we need to keep ourselves unique.
Thank you. Stephen, chain stores in Ojai?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am not for chain stores, and I am not reflexively against them either. I think that we need a vigorous public debate on the current formula business ordinance, and let the community decide how much we want here. My personal feeling is it doesn't hurt to have small chain stores here. Those of you that are afraid of a big box store somewhere in the valley can stop worrying. There are not enough people here, there never will be enough people here to support a big box store. And I would say, let's talk it over like the neighbors that we are here in Ojai, and decide what as a community we want to see in terms of business here. I think a mix is good for the economy, it's good for jobs, it's good for tax revenue. I'd like to fill the empty spaces like the bowling alley with some kind of business. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, what are your thoughts re size of second dwelling units? Do you foresee a change? Second dwelling units. And we will begin this question with Randy.
when we talk about the change of size, I think right now it's 640 square feet, if I'm correct on that. So I would not be opposed to increasing the size of a second unit dwelling. That'd be the first response to that. The other part of it is to me is how many of those units do we have in the valley? And and they're a source of revenue for obviously the person that has it. They're also an opportunity for young couples and young people or people in general to rent. So it helps in our rental inventory stock. So 640 square feet is the size of my family room. I'd have a hard time putting 4 people in it or 3 people in it. So again, I would not be opposed to increasing the size of that.
Next speaker, Brandon, on changing the size of second dwelling units.
I think putting a cookie cutter size like 640 square feet on a second dwelling is maybe inappropriate. I think that second dwellings should be related to sizes of property, particular areas in the neighborhood. There are plenty of areas in the neighborhood in our community that could easily support a larger dwelling than 650 square feet for a second dwelling. I also have friends that live within 100 yards of here who have second dwellings on properties that barely have enough room for the home that there is. So I think that second dwellings should be more related to the size of the property and the area of the community.
Thank you. Paul, second dwellings, changing the size of them?
I tend to agree with what Brandon just said. We have an ordinance where it's 640 square feet. With certain exceptions, we can go up to as large as 1,000 square feet. The county's at 1,250 square feet for second dwelling units. I think that we ought to look at it from a more realistic neighborhood size of the property. Obviously, you don't want to put a 1,200 square foot second dwelling unit on Shady Lane, but you certainly could put a 1,250 square foot on some of the properties on North Signal Street. So I think we have to look at a reasonable, what's a reasonable size given the size of the property, and take a common sense approach to it when we do that.
Thank you. Stephen, changing the size of second dwellings?
From what I have read and learned around the community, I would be in favor of increasing the allowable size of second units. Judy and my first apartment was 600 square feet, and we were constantly going out on the balcony to get a little air. That's pretty small, and you can't get a young family with children into 640 square feet. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. 1,000 square feet is even pretty small, and when I was young, my family lived in a house that size down in Hawthorne. I think that, as Paul said, we need to take account of the size of the property. Some places will take only small second units. Some could take larger than the current county allowance for second units, and they could be full-fledged homes for young couples with multiple children. And I think that's something we ought to encourage here in the Valley.
Thank you. And the last speaker on this question, William?
This is something that the Building Appeals Board, again, which I chair, has been spending a lot of time on. In fact, we've generated some recommendations for both the non-conforming units, otherwise known as the amnesty program, as well as recommendations on the conforming second unit program. Obviously, we have to acknowledge that the existing ordinance was put in place to inhibit these. And now I think we all understand that, subject again to setbacks, lot coverage, neighborhood characteristics, it's part of the answer to dealing with reversing the downward trend in young people and young families. Multi-generational living on lots, on property is a very strong trend in this country right now for a lot of reasons, and I think we can do it within the right characteristics and nature of Ojai and help some of our larger problems and provide more opportunities to bring young people into this valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, and we will start with Brandon. Do you support Measure A, directly elected mayors in Ojai? Why or why not?
This is a question that's come up to me a number of times over the course of the last several weeks as I've been involved in this run for city council. I thought a lot about it, and I spent a lot of time weighing the pros and the cons of both options. And the decision I came up with is that I support an elected mayor wholeheartedly, and a 4-year term is what I would support. Thank you.
Paul?
I do support an elected mayor. I think the city would be well served by an elected mayor. I think it would give the citizens a point person who is elected by the citizens to go to to help solve problems through the city hall. We're not talking about an administrative mayor where the mayor would actually be running the city manager would still be doing that, but the elected mayor would definitely work very closely with the city manager and would be able to assist in several things, including seeing that things are on the agenda more than they are now. But I think my main reason for supporting it is I think it would give the citizens a point person to go to that's been directly elected by them to help solve their problems, and I would be in favor of it for a 2-year term.
Thank you, Stephen. Directly elected mayors for Ojai.
Thank you. I support Measure A, and I have direct experience in this with the charitable nonprofit organizations that I have led or participated in the management of. Those that have a 1-year term for the president always have a rookie at the helm. And no matter what your experience being on the council is, for example, you don't know what it's like being mayor until you're there. The organizations I've been in that had 2-year terms are much better managed. So that's my first reason. My second reason is, while the mayor's responsibilities are not all that different from the other council members inside the city, the mayor also represents all of us outside the city limits. And I would like to have a direct voice in who does that. And even if my candidate for mayor loses, at least I had my shot at deciding who's representing us outside the city.
Thank you. And William, directly elected mayors, Measure A.
They keep talking about keeping ourselves on this development path that is so special about Ojai, which means we need to learn from experience. We almost had a 65-foot cell tower right on Grand Avenue because we had a breakdown in communication between the council and the staff. What do we learn from that? I think we learn from that we need an elected mayor to be a point of communication to ensure the right kind of communication that we need, so those kinds of threats don't get as far as they got on that particular case. I think it's also very important that there be a sense of, again, we're not in a general law city, we're talking about a mayor with any administrative duties, but a mayor that represents the people as a whole, and everybody has a chance to decide who they want to run city council.
And our last speaker on this question, Randy.
You know, as the owner of a small business, I'm the leader of it. It's plain and simple. When the client has a problem, they come to me. When my employees have a problem, they come to me. And that's what we need. We need leadership, and a mayor would provide that in this city. So I am obviously for that. Second thing, I would be for a 2-year or a 4-year. I think the 4-year would give us a longer time frame for that mayor to learn his job or her job and to excel at it. So again, I'd probably lean to a 4-year. But the most important thing that a mayor is going to provide us is, as citizens, if we have an issue, instead of going to 5 people, we can go to 1. And that person can then disseminate that issue, and it can be discussed openly. The other thing that it's going to provide, again, that cell tower issue, is the fact that the citizens all had to come together in a hurry to go solve a problem. That problem could have been solved sooner.
Thank you, Randy. Our next question, and we will begin this question with Paul. The questioner asks, as a council person, do you feel it is important to represent the citizens of the city of Ojai or those in the whole valley?
My responsibility is totally to the citizens of Ojai. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of citizens from outside the Ojai, outside the city limits, that don't provide our city with a lot of volunteer time, a lot of expertise, a lot of organizations. I'm thinking of the Ojai Defense Fund for one, the Green Coalition. There's many people outside our community that serve on those particular, or serve within those particular organizations. And I support them doing that, and I really do thank them for their time and their effort. But as an elected official from the city of Ojai, my entire allegiance is only to those citizens of Ojai.
And the next person on that one, Stephen?
Thank you. Paul's right. When you're elected by the citizens of Ojai, that has to be your primary responsibility, is to represent them. I recall, though, at a recent council meeting where there was a great deal of discussion about the people of Ojai influencing the Ventura County regulations for wireless communications. That is, things that went on outside the city limits. If we expect to be able to have some influence that way, I think we need to take some cognizance of the attitudes of the people and the businesses that are outside the city limits. So yes, our primary responsibility is to each of you inside the city, but we have to consider what's going on outside the city, because it's only 4.2 square miles, and we don't live in a vacuum.
Thank you. And William, your response to where you're putting your allegiance?
Obviously, first allegiance is to the people who elect me, if I'm so honored to sit on the city council. But I think everyone also realizes, as the city's general plan and many other documents talk about, that the city's not an island. And in order to represent those interests of the citizens of Ojai, we need to have the kind of communication and cooperation and work with other agencies throughout the valley. There's no way getting around it that the city of Ojai represents a leadership position, a pace setter for the community as a whole, for the valley as a whole. But we also need to realize that we're affected by the entire rest of the valley. We need to really emphasize, and I keep coming back to this, we need to step up the kind of cooperation that we do with other agencies, whether it's the school district, whether it's the sanitary district, because all of these things affect the character of the city of Ojai, again, as was already stated, is less than 5 square miles.
Thank you. And Randy, your thoughts on representation?
Well, as an elected official, obviously, my heart and soul would be to the citizens of this community. We are the hub of the valley, though, and again, we have to recognize that we interact with a lot of agencies that affect us, and we obviously, some of the things that we do affect other areas. So the question is, where would my allegiance be? And it would be with the citizens of Ojai. But we cannot forget the fact that we are the hub of this community and that everyone looks for us for guidance.
Thank you. And finally, Brandon, your thoughts on this question?
The lines drawn on the maps that designate the city in and of itself are the people who would vote for the city council members. I believe that what the city council does affects people well outside those lines, and throughout the valley, the school district's much larger than that, and although I hope that the citizens of the city here in and of itself vote for me for city council, I would definitely be committed to the valley as a whole.
Thank you, Brandon. Our next question, and by the way, thank you everybody for writing such lovely questions for everybody. Stephen, we're going to begin with you, and this questioner asks, why should the public pay more in fees than the utilities pay?
For the same size and scope of permitted work, they shouldn't. Right now, an encroachment is what it's called legally, and that's where you're cutting up the street right in front of your property to do water, sewer, whatever. It can cost you anywhere from $150 to $450 in the city code right now for one encroachment. Gold State Water paid $550 for a year's worth. That's not right. The fees, the permits should be recorded. They should be in writing. It should not be a matter of who you know or of negotiation with city staff. They're all good people, but this should not be in their purview. Everyone should live by the same rules.
Thank you, Stephen. And William, what's your comments about fees and equitable fees?
Mr. Quilisi pretty nailed it. I think that where the question's going at. The fee schedule is before the City Council this coming Tuesday, and that's one of the issues that I think is still going to require further vetting. We cannot have a situation where we have inequity in terms of fee schedules, especially for things like encroachment in public utilities. There are situations, for example, where the city has really played catch-up with things like making sure that backfills are done according to best practices. Other types of repair to streets are done. So in general, this is an issue that really needs a lot of further study. And I think the idea of inequity and encroachment permits between individual property owners and public utilities is an issue that needs to really be straightened out.
Thank you. Randy, your thoughts on fees?
Well, I think it's a pretty simple answer, that they need to be equal and they need to be fair. One agency or a public agency shouldn't be any different than a citizen. That takes me to the thing that William just brought up, and that's the fee structures in general. We're increasing our fees across the board based on what other cities are doing. We haven't really assessed or addressed the fees in our city and why we're increasing some of them by 100%, some of them by 200%, some of them by even greater amounts. We need to do that in-house, and we need to base our fee structure on what's good for Ojai, not necessarily what other agencies are doing or other city or counties are doing.
Thank you. Brandon?
The encroachment fees for utilities being so much lower than what it is for the general public is offensive. I find that in my own experience, I feel like sometimes the public agencies have a tendency to overfee the public almost as a deterrent to keep people from doing certain types of developments. I don't believe that that's right, and I believe that the city should work very hard at making sure that the fee schedules are appropriate, equal, and not intended to out-fee the public.
Thank you. And Paul, the last speaker on this question.
The issue of our fee schedule is going to be before the council on Tuesday night, and I do not make up my mind until after we have a whole public hearing on an issue. So I don't have the data in front of me right now to answer the question fully, nor would I want to tell you the way that I would vote before I've had an opportunity to hear from everybody. I can tell you that in all fairness, I believe the fee schedules should be equal for public utilities, and they should, as they are for other citizens. And the fees have to have a rational basis to what it actually costs the city, and that's the direction we're going. But again, until we have all the data in and until we have all the information from Tuesday night, I will reserve the way that I would feel after the public hearing.
Thank you. Do you need to take a breath yet? Time to inhale. We're getting there, folks. This is our 10th question, and we're going to start with William. All right, William. Our population has declined in all categories except the under 55. What would you do to address this issue of declining population?
Slight correction, it's a decline in all except 55 to 65.
Oh, well, okay, 55 to 65.
And I think that you have, at least that's the latest demographic that I saw. And I think what we're talking about is an issue that is a natural part of our society and how it's developing, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we really need to think about this issue. And we've already spoke about it. When we have a lot of people of my age group that have raised their children here, they've moved away, and now there's fewer people living in those properties. We also have people like myself that want to live here, but we're not bringing our children with us. And what we've already spoken about in terms of second units, in terms of something we haven't spoken about in terms of recreational facilities, in terms of cooperation with the school system, to do innovative programs to attract families to the valley. That's what we need to look at. We need to look at the affordability, the feasibility, and the attractiveness of the valley for families, because I don't want to see us become a family-less enclave.
Thank you, William. And Randy, how would you address the issue of declining population under the ages of 55?
Well, my son's 30, he just got married, and hopefully he's going to increase the population. Having said that, we're still looking at, can you afford to live in Ojai?
Yeah.
And as of right now, he has a good income and his wife has a good income. So yes, they can afford right now to rent in Ojai. And hopefully one day they'll be able to afford to live in Ojai. But there's a lot of people who can't. It's just that simple. And again, until we increase the job base here in the valley, until we can figure out how to make things more affordable, which, again, I have a hard time with that term, because affordability and affordable means a lot to each, means something different to each one of us. So, again, it's a tough question, and it's something that the community has to address together. And there's no other way around that. It's something that we're all aware of, and it's something that we all need to work on.
Thank you, Randy. Brandon, do you have thoughts on increasing population?
Yes, I think that improving our schools' facilities will help draw younger couples here. I think improving our city's relationship with businesses and the development of business, as we spoke about earlier. I think encouraging youth facilities and youth activities, as we talked about earlier, will all help bring younger families into our community, as well as the effort to increase low-income housing or affordable housing.
Thank you, Brandon. And Paul?
The solution to the problem is pretty clear. We need more jobs and we need more affordable housing. How do we get jobs here that are going to attract young families? Is by putting together an economic council that can look at those types of industries that would be very good for Ojai and see if we can attract them through tax incentives and other means to come to Ojai. And then somehow we've got to be able to find affordable housing for them to live in. But I really think, and this might be something that the school system, the school district and the city could work hard at, is the school is very interested in bringing people into the Ojai Valley for their population, and we're interested in bringing it in because the viability of our community depends on families. Then maybe the school district and the city can come up with some sort of an economic development schedule or scheme that might be able to attract some businesses to Ojai that'll create new jobs.
Thank you, Paul. And Stephen, your thoughts on this?
Thank you. It's tough being fifth to answer this question because the answers are pretty much out there in front of us right now. We need more jobs in the valley, which means we need to attract business. And as Paul says, tax incentives or other kinds of flexibility in our municipal code that will encourage the development of small business in the valley will be key. Second, the council needs to understand what the housing stock in the city is, not in the valley, because we can't influence that directly. But we need to know what the housing stock is here, and we don't know right now. There are second and third units. Some are vacation rentals or transient occupancy. Some are full-time rentals. Some are appropriate to small families, and some only to couples, and some only to singles. And we need to know what that data is so the council can make some informed decisions about affordable housing.
Thank you. Our next question. Someone would like to know, what is the city spending money on, and what does it not need to spend money on? And our first speaker will be Randy.
0 for 3. What are we spending money on? And what do we spend money less on?
Yes, what is the city, quote, spending money on, unquote, and what does it not need to spend money on, I guess is the end of that question.
Well, I don't, it's an interesting question. I don't have all the facts before me to actually tell you what the city is spending their money on. I personally believe that the city has come out of this recession rather well. I think right now that Greg Grant and a lot of the employees of the city are doing a wonderful job taking care of the money and the funds that they're allocated with right now. So I don't have a sense that we're wasting money here. I have a sense that right now we're doing as good as we can with the resources that are available to us.
Thank you, Randy. And now, Brandon.
So, great question. I have the very same question. Part of the reason I'm running for city council is I would like to know exactly what we are spending money on that we don't need to spend money on, or things where we need to be relocating the money and that sort of thing. So these are all things that I intend to find out if I'm elected for city council.
Thank you, Brandon. And Paul?
We have a total transparent budget process in our city. Anybody that wants to look and see exactly where money is being spent can attend the budget hearings that we have on an annual basis. You can look at the line items and you can see exactly where the money is going. One of the things that I'm most proud about in this city is our fiscal responsibility. The citizens have nothing to worry about, like you've heard in other cities, where the money is being squandered or the money is being ill-spent or it's being spent in areas that are really frivolous. We pay very close attention to where the money is going. We've been able to start putting set-asides to the tune of $200,000 and $300,000 a year that we pay to our infrastructure, such as our roads, before we even budget. We look at every position when it's been vacated as to whether or not we're going to replace that position, and many times we have not, and we filled it with existing personnel. But I would defy anybody to go through our budgeting process and to look at our budget and come up with any one of our items that they would believe to be frivolous.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Thank you. As Paul says, if you want to know where the money's being spent right now, look at the warrants section of the notes that are behind every city council agenda. That'll tell you to the penny where money's being spent and from which funding sources it's being spent. That said, and while I applaud much of what the council's doing right now, I would say there might be a couple of things where we could have better spent the money. $30,000 for an assistant attorney to the city attorney to handle a code enforcement case doesn't strike me as the right thing. I would rather have seen that spent on additional city staff to do code enforcement, which I thought was the job of the city staff in the first place. Secondly, I don't know yet, even having heard discussion at city council meetings, what the $10,000 to the Green Coalition is accomplishing for the city. I'm sure it will be spent. I'm not sure what will be accomplished other than tell people to turn off their lights at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. And our final comment on this question about spending, William?
It is a fact, interestingly enough, and I don't say this with any pointed criticism of anyone, because I think, as Councilman Blatt said, the fiscal controls in the city are quite sound. However, if you look at the statistics, the per capita expenditure that the citizens are charged with for the administration of the city of Ojai is among the highest in the county of Ventura. There may be good reasons for that. I don't know the answers, but it's certainly something that I would like to look more closely at if I become a city council person. And the second comment I would make is to amplify what Mr. Haney just said. If we have good communication, we don't have to spend money fixing problems or dealing with mistakes. And for example, on the wireless situation, we had to spend a lot of money fixing a problem that could have been fixed, could have been avoided by better communication in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrick. Well, maybe we'll pep up the discussion a little bit here. Here's someone who is asking for your support. Would you support directing the city staff to write zoning rules for medical cannabis public access in the city? And the great person to start is Brandon on this question. Would you like me to repeat that question? Would you like to hear it again?
Please repeat it, yes.
Yes. Would you support directing the city staff to write zoning rules for medical cannabis, I think he said med-cannabis, public access use in the city of Ojai? I mean, just,
No.
One answer? No. All right. I'll write that down. Next question on, not the next question, the next comment on establishing medical cannabis selling features, stores in the city, would be Paul.
This is an issue that's before the city right now, in fact, and we've done a lot of investigating into it. It is legal. There are people in our community that do need medical marijuana. Medical marijuana does serve a purpose. One of the problems we have when dealing with it, though, is the issue of outside forces that may influence the co-ops that are being used in a legal, that are attempting to be used in a legal way but having it be influence from exterior forces that may cause them to be more used in an illegal way. If you were asking the question as to whether or not we should have dispensaries for the purposes of allowing people to get legitimately needed medical marijuana, I am all for it. The problem is how do we assure that we can keep it that way? And that's something that the city is wrestling with right now on one of the applications before us.
Stephen, your thoughts on the sale of medical marijuana in the city?
The shorter answer is no. Medical marijuana is legal under California law. It is still a violation of federal law. And until that changes, I find it difficult to encourage businesses to come into the city and break federal law. I recognize the need for this product. I would rather have some other city deal with the unintended consequences that Paul has talked about.
And our next respondent on that is William.
We've been talking about jobs. We have a legal product. I would concur with Mr. Blatz that if this legal product can be handled properly without the unintended negative consequences that he was referring to, that it's the kind of thing that we should look at as a legal business and welcome the jobs to the community.
And finally, Randy, excuse me.
Well, I'd only support it if it was a chain store. So again, I deal with a lot of young people here in the valley, and marijuana or pot's just it's out there. It's something that they do, and I'd be very concerned if there was a dispensary here in town that would even create a greater opportunity for these young people to have access to it. So, no, I would not be for it.
Okay. Well, we're getting down to the end of our questions, and this question is about vacation rentals. Should Ojai allow vacation rentals? And if so, should there be a difference between R1 and R2 zoning? And the first person to start this one is Paul.
Vacation rentals are a situation I consider it to be a problem that's going to face the city council and faces the city council right now. We've had many discussions about it, and principally the discussions that we've had are the impacts that these have on neighborhoods and what kind of impacts they are. And secondly, that it's a fairness situation where these vacation rentals are getting away without charging the transient occupancy tax that all of our other hotel keepers have to charge for guests to be there. So somehow we've got to come to terms with it, and there's going to be a lot more discussion in the future. I am welcoming public input on this one because I think it's twofold. One is, the general rule would be if you collected the occupancy tax and they have a business license and you know where they are, fine. But I want to hear what the community has to say about it in terms of these in their neighborhood, the ones that are there now, and what kind of an negative effect they may be having.
Stephen, your comments on vacation rentals?
I would largely agree with Paul. The first matter of the transient occupancy tax is a simple matter of equity. If you're an innkeeper and you have to charge that, then the same rule should apply if you are an innkeeper of one little room, called a second unit or a vacation rental. As far as the impact on neighborhoods, I do think that we need to see a vigorous public debate in front of the city council and see if we can come up with ideas for better handling the adverse effects of that very transient population. But again, the same rules should apply to everyone, and the people's will, as reflected by the judgment of their city council members, should be what prevails.
Thank you. And William, your thoughts on vacation rentals?
I've already alluded to the fact that vacation rentals have impacts on residential housing supply, have impacts on people's feeling of equity in terms of their property rights in residential areas. What I want to point out is how we need to do better. because we're entering our 5th year of having a moratorium on the enforcement of the existing code, which says that transient occupancy is not allowed in residential zones. The city council didn't quite know what to do with this when complaints started to come in a few years ago, and recognized there was a problem. And by delaying addressing this issue, by saying, well, we're just not going to enforce, but we don't know what to do about it for so many years, people have started to make investment decisions on an expectation of non-enforcement of the code. This is not a good practice, and I think we can do better.
Randy, vacation rentals, what's your opinion on that one?
Well, my gut says that we ought to register them, and that they should be paying the occupancy tax just like everyone else. I don't know how many of these units we have, so I'd be in favor of opening it up to the public and finding out, one, how many we have, two, how much possible income this could generate for the community, and three, the adverse conditions or that they create in the community. So until I have that information, it'd be difficult to say anything more other than I'd be in favor of taxing them and bringing them into the system.
Thank you. And Brandon, your thoughts on this question?
I don't think the second unit ordinance in our city was really particularly designed for vacation rentals. I think that if a second unit is being used as a vacation rental, that it should pay the occupancy tax just like all inns. I believe there's also, an exception to that sort of thing, and that if someone is living in their home and maybe they rent it out on occasion, or they do some sort of a home swap with somebody somewhere else, I don't think that that's causing any real issue for our innkeepers. So I think that maybe that the occupancy or the transient occupancy tax should be based on amount of rental that's actually being done. If somebody's renting out their house once or twice a year, I don't think that's causing a problem. But if they're renting it out on a daily basis or a weekly basis, I think that's where the city should focus its energy on.
Thank you. This is our last question for this evening, and it'll be begun with Stephen. If elected, what would be the absolutely first thing you would do as a council person?
Thank you. The first thing that I would do is make sure that when the council has a decision to make, is to see that it has good, timely, complete, and accurate information from the city manager and the city staff as a basis for making an obviously fair and transparent and logical decision. Right now, I don't think there's enough demand on the city manager and staff for good data to provide good decisions by the city council.
And William, your comments? What would be the first thing you'd do if you're in the door?
First thing I've already alluded to is I think we need to really look at issues in our code that are confusing to people, not clear, and we really need to address that as soon as possible across the board. I think we need to designate a strong communication liaison link with the school system. It's something that's been missing. We need to do it. I also would amplify, I think, what Mr. Quillisi just says. We need to have absolutely strong, fact-based reports and have a culture, really push for a culture where staff expects tough questions from the council and doesn't resent them.
And Randy, what would be your first objective if elected?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is how difficult it is to speak in public. And
You've done a great job, Randy.
and as chair of the Recreation and Parks Commission, I go to the city council meetings all the time. I should feel comfortable, but the reality is I'm not. And I don't think anyone that stands up before the city council at that podium walks up there thinking they're Godzilla. They're walking up there with a ton of fear, and they're walking up there walking through that fear. And I would tell every citizen of this community that the most important thing that I could do as a council person is, one, to remove that fear, two, to listen to you, and to be open, and to create an environment where you do stand up and you do want to speak, that you're heard.
Thank you. And Brandon, your thoughts on what's the first thing you'd do?
So one of the main reasons why I'm running for city council is I've been down at the city council meetings, I've listened to the decisions that get made, and I think a lot of times that one or more of the council members is making decisions with limited information. So I have to agree somewhat with Steve that making sure that the city council is making decisions based on all the information, and that the city council members have spent the time necessary to really understand the issues before making decisions. I think that's would probably be my top priority.
And Paul?
My top priority, as we go into the next term, is affordable housing. And I want to make sure that the city does everything that it can to find some property and work with a private entity to get some affordable housing built in town. That's going to be my number one. That's going to be my number one goal, is to do that, and that's not very far in front of dealing with the Groundwater Basin Agency to find out exactly what's happening with our groundwater. I think that's something that's very important. There's going to be a presentation on Tuesday night, and I think it would behoove everybody to come and listen to them, because I'm concerned about our basin, but I don't have enough data to know whether my concern is legitimate. So those are the two things that I'm going to be looking at right away after being reelected.
Thank you. We are now at our concluding time period, and each person will have 1 minute to tell you why you should vote for him. Okay, we're going to begin with Stephen.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe I offer to you as a city council member a unique blend of business and financial experience and public service. I've spent 40 years in aerospace. I have a PhD in applied physics from Stanford. I'm used to dealing with hard data and making hard logical decisions. I'm currently involved in running 3 charitable nonprofit organizations, and I've done that sort of thing everywhere we've lived, Judy and I, the last 40 plus years. And I would like to be able to help the city in the same way. I'm committed to listening respectfully and carefully to all interested opinions before making decisions, but I pledge to you that I will use my good judgment and logic and a demand for good data from city manager and staff before making decisions.
Thank you.
Finally, are we done?
Yes, Paul?
We go on this way?
Yes, we're just going to go
Okay.
down the line.
I want to thank the league once again, and thank everyone for being here tonight. 4 years ago, I pledged to protect our community from the external forces that could easily devastate Ojai forever. I wanted to protect our environment, and I promised that I would protect our small-town character and to give respect to everyone's opinions, and to make sure that I guaranteed that I would listen to all sides of an issue before I made my own mind up and I cast a vote. Tonight, once again, to the citizens of Ojai, I make these same pledges to you, and I respectfully ask for your vote to re-elect me on November 4th.
Thank you. Brandon?
I would also like to thank everyone for coming, and I'm very excited about the potential opportunity to serve the community in a way that I haven't had the opportunity to do before. I'm excited about learning much more about what goes on in our local government and making good decisions based on good information from the staff personnel. I think that our local government needs some fresh, sensible air, and I think I represent that. I'm looking forward to all of your votes.
Thank you. Randy?
I started out being of service at an early age. I was in Cub Scouts. We were taught to be of service. I was in Boy Scouts. We were taught to be in service. My entire life, I've been in service. And the last 20 years here in Ojai especially. Again, a high school football coach / mentor / father / friend. I've done it all at that level, and I've also committed myself to the Parks and Recreation community. So, as a city council member, if I'm elected, I'd dedicate myself to continue what I have been doing, and that's to be active in this community, to be a willing listener, to be a patient and understanding individual, and most importantly, to conduct the business of the city in an open manner. Thank you.
And William, your comments?
I would ask you to consider voting for me because I have, I believe, a conjunction between the dedication and passion for this phenomenon, which is Ojai, combined with the experience and background to be an effective council member. I have a PhD in economics with special emphasis in the areas of public utility economics and environmental economics. That gives me a lot of insight in terms of dealing with a lot of the problems facing the city of Ojai. I have decades of experience working with city government, educational organizations, volunteer organizations. I was vice president for business affairs for a large university for 10 years. None of that means that I'm sitting here thinking, well, I have answers. If I can tell you one story from being vice president for business affairs, I learned very soon that the best way to know what's going on is to get on the ground in the field and listen to people doing the work. And that's what I would offer to you, is open mind, but with the dedication and experience to be an effective council representative. I know the right questions to ask.
Thank you. Let's give everybody a big applause, please. Before you leave, we'd just like to make a few thank yous. We thank the City of Ojai and Rhonda Bashur, and tell you that this program will be streamed live on, not live, but streamed, I guess, on Channel 10, and also on the ohaicity.org website. And again, come up and say hello to these guys, tell them thank you for coming, check their websites out, but most of all, vote on November 4th. Thank you very much.